Hello and welcome to this tutorial. For this one I'm not going to show you too much about the entire image, but more specifically the shadow work that I've done on it. I had a few people ask me how it was recreated, because originally it started off life in this studio, and shadows can be really difficult sometimes to produce if you're doing a composite image. And it's also something that you could use in, a real-world image that's shot in a real environment on location. For example, you might want to adjust how the shadow sits or falls within the car. It'd also be something that you could use for things like rolling shots if you want to add in motion blur into an environment and do that. So I'm going to show you how I've done this shadow to see if, to hopefully help you out when and if you need to recreate that. So let me just take you through these layers quickly. Just on the top I've got the final adjustments. Within that you've got the flare, which I've just added in that top right corner, and there's also this red glow from the tail light, and the cleanup layer where I've cleaned up a bit of the floor and adjusted the contrast through Color Effects Pro, which is part of the Nick collection, which I recommend if you haven't already got it. So I'm just going to get rid of that, so we're back here, and then today I will be showing you how to do this shadow here. Now this shadow is made up of 3 layers, and it starts off with the base layer here, and then I adjust it to here, and then there's a slightly broader blur on that one, and then some finer detailed blur as well. So I'm going to recreate the whole thing so that you can see exactly how I've done it. When I say I'm going to recreate the whole thing, it's probably not going to look exactly the same, but it will give you an idea on how I've created that. So to start off, let's get a new layer here, which is Shift Command N, I believe, or you can use one of these as well. Which one is it? Oh, that one, isn't it? Yeah, there you go. All right, so on the new layer, I'm just going to outline the shape of the shadow that I'm looking to achieve, which is, of course, in this instance, just the shape of the car. And you want to go fairly close there, but you want a little bit of extra room. You can always adjust the shape of the shadow with masks, which is obviously what we're going to be doing today. But yeah, for this one, it's mostly just a pretty straightforward rectangular shape. Bring that up here. Now, once that's selected, just right click, make selection. I'm going to keep this at 0 pixels. Any kind of blur or feathering that we need to do, I'll do it as I go. And on that new layer, you can just fill that. I'm just using the brush here, but just make that black. So there's the start of the layer. Now this is just going to be the shadow template. So I'm just going to rename that for you. And always want to make sure that you've got that for future layers of the shadow. So I'm going to just duplicate that. I'm going to make this one invisible, and I'm going to start working on this. What you can do here, if you want, is just to save yourself a bit of time later, just duplicate it a couple of times. So for this, I'm going to, first off, actually, I'll change the blending mode on this one. Sometimes you use normal. It's very much case by case. I'm not always going to use the same technique, roughly the same technique, but it will differ. In this instance, I used soft light because it created a real nice contrast underneath the car. Normal looks a bit flat when you reduce the opacity of the layer. I'll show you here. There's no real kind of contrast there, but switching that to soft light really brings out the lights and the darks between the in the ground texture. So I'm going to leave that around here, so say 79, 80%. Then I'm just going to switch to the Gaussian blur. Gaussian blur, is that how you say it? I always get that mixed up. And I'm going to bring that up a bit to here. So this is more of a softer layer that you can get some texture with. And obviously I'll perhaps adjust it later down the line. And for this one, I'm going to keep that at normal because I want this one to be dark. I want this to stay a darker black. And with this, I want to bring out some of the detail from the shadow that's cast naturally. So here you can see obviously the shadow towards the, well, you can't really see it that well here, but there's a small part of it there. See, notice how the shadow is a lot sharper towards the tyre, and then gradually as it moves on and the distance between the ground and the vehicle gets further and further away, it becomes softer and softer. So as a general rule, anything that's closer to the ground is going to cast a sharper shadow than if it was, say for example, up here. So I want to recreate a similar look, and with that I'm going to start around here, and this is just a fairly rough kind of line. You'll adjust it as you go. I'm going to keep that one down here as well. Bring that in tighter, and then just get a bit of a curve towards the tyre there. That's probably not going to look quite right, but I'll be adjusting that later. So go ahead and make a selection of that. I'm probably going to say around 8 pixels feather radius on there, and then of course I need to create a mask, and I'm going to get rid of this sharp, oh sorry, I'm going to invert that mask, there we go, and I'm going to get rid of this around here. Which obviously doesn't look right now, but this is just to get that sharper line closer to the tyre, which I'm probably going to adjust over here by just painting back in some of the mask with white. I'm going to reduce the flow down just a touch, and the smaller the brush, the harder the line will be. Obviously with a big brush you're going to get, I'll show you here, you're going to get a softer mask, sorry, softer line. I'm going to bring that up a touch and just paint back in some of the area that's closest to the tyre here. And then using a slightly softer brush, there. Yeah, I think I'm happy with that line. And then do the same for the front. So smaller, harsher line. And then what I'm doing here is I'm using the little bracket keys to gradually increase the size or decrease the size. As I'm getting further away, I want to increase it. Add a little bit more in here. then use a larger brush, brush to get rid of that. Maybe a little bit more. Yeah, I think that's gonna start looking good here. So where I'd chosen I think it was 8 pixel radius earlier, I think I'm going to try and get a bit more detail back in here, a bit of a sharper line. I'm going to do that again with the brush, so there's a bit more control over where I'm going. I might increase the flow. Probably a little bit too much. Just that touch more. Okay, that's getting to roughly how I want it to look. This isn't quite straight. I'm going to use a pen tool, sorry. Another thing that I find I often do, and I'll show you that now, is bring it a fair way in. Select that, let's go with 8 again. Let's gradually, using the 14% flow on here at the moment, gradually just get rid of that. So I'm pretty happy with where that's going. That's got a nice sharp edge that I can work from. And then what I will now do is gradually bring this back in, but slightly more feathered. So I'm going to bring the flow up to, I don't know, 50% or so, and then using the mask, which is, just show you now, is looking a bit like this. I'm going to start bringing some more. Actually, I'm going to bring that down. Going to start bringing some more in with a larger brush. You see how that line is really softening up now. I don't want to go too close to this side. Yeah, I'm liking how that's looking. I'm going to adjust this. The tire brightness is way too bright there, so I need to darken that, and I'll show you how I do that. Now, a similar story for the back. There's a lot more room, a lot larger of an area to do here. So I'm going to do it as, fairly gradually. I'm going to drop the flow there to 3%, and then just gradually paint that back in. Don't worry too much about that sharp line at the bottom. We're going to get rid of that in a sec. So that's looking pretty good there. And then just select the black brush to then, I'm going to bring this up. Go for something a little bit larger, just to get rid of that sharp line, that sharp edge. Yeah, I'm liking how that's coming out. We've got that nice sharp edge there. Let's bring this in. Just try and sharpen it right by the tyre. Do the same for here. Yeah, that's looking good, looking good. Then a softer brush, lower opacity for this back edge here. I want to bring that in. In fact, I'm probably going to need to adjust that. That's a bit too high, a bit too low, sorry. I think I need to go further back for this one. Yeah, because that line would probably come around and then bring it in here. Choose the same 8 again. And then mask back in that sharper edge there. So it's a bit fiddly. It will gradually, I mean, it will take a bit of time for you to do it if it's not something that you've done before. I mean, unless you're more competent than I am, which probably isn't too hard. So that's starting to look how I want it. So it's very dark at the back. What I'd probably do in this case is just bring the opacity of that layer down a touch. So we're getting a little bit more of that detail and that texture on the ground below. But you're still retaining that shadow's shape here. I think that's looking good. Okay. All right, yeah. So, and then with the third layer, this is just for my darks. So let's call this one soft. There you go. And we'll call this one detail. And then for this one, let's just call this darks. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm just going to try and reintroduce the darkest areas of the shadow. Things like below the tyres. Sometimes I might do it, you know, in the centre of the vehicle shadow here as well. Let's just see how that goes for this one. So for that, I'm going to get a mask. I'm going to press Control or Command I to invert that. And then using, say, about, I don't know, 8% flow on a white brush, I'm going to gradually reintroduce some of those darker areas. Where the shadow would be slightly darker. I'm going to do the same here. Now what you can do, another option, I'd duplicated the original shadow template layer, excuse me. What you could do, because you've just spent all of that time perfecting these lines and getting that all right, you could just use that one. So I think what I'm going to do is do that. Let's do that, because that's going to be a bit easier. So I've just duplicated that layer, including the mask, which is just Control or Command J, and then I'm going to apply that mask so that this layer looks like this. I'm going to put the opacity up to 100%. And then let's try it again. Add the mask, invert that mask, and then start reintroducing that. Don't want to get too much here because I don't want to lose too much of that texture. I think it would have a little bit. And the secret, or I say secret, the key I think here is to just have nice soft lines. You don't want anything too sharp or too obvious. Might just darken it right underneath here. Whoops. That, I think I'm pretty happy with that. Get a bit darker up here. Yeah, I've got rid of most of that detail, but it gives you the idea. You can choose to keep it should you wish to. There are, I'm sure, going to be examples where you would want to keep more of that detail there. But overall, I think I'm just about done with it. And then I noticed with this soft one, it's quite harsh over in this back corner. So I want to try and reduce that a little bit, and perhaps a bit up the front. So I'm going to get a mask on this layer. Just gradually delete some of it, but not too much. I need to lose some of this. I've added some of that back in. That's better. I can do the same for this. I think this could be a little bit closer. Yeah. But yeah, so back to this layer here, try and tone down some of that. So for something like that, I'd drop it down to 1 or 2%. Excuse me. And just gently get rid of some of that. I think the main problem here. Oh, I guess not. I thought there was a darker patch in the ground, but it certainly appears darker, probably because that's set to soft light. And just soften that up. I do want that a bit longer at the back. Yeah, I think that's about where I want it. Let's compare that to what I had before. Yes, it's pretty much the same. Slight difference. Like I say, it's never going to be the exact same, but the process is you can apply those to each thing, but just take it as it comes. And then I might, let's have a look. Where's this one here? Yeah, I think I'm pleased with that. Now, I mentioned earlier, you want to try and match the well, in my opinion, in most cases, you want to try and match a little bit of the like darken the tire, because otherwise you get like this line, which is obviously very unnatural looking. You want to kind of just darken that slightly. So what I do here is, for whatever layer you're using for your vehicle, I just add Shift Command or Control N to create a new layer. I then hit this one. What do you do on a PC for that? It's Alt or Option on a Mac, so I think it's probably Alt on a PC. But create a new layer, and I think that's what is it called? I don't even know. It's a clipping mask, I think. I'm not sure. Anyway, just add that to that, and then all I would do is either using completely black or matching an area, close to the tire, perhaps the darkest. Yeah, I'll probably just use this. So where it's very dark here, I'm just going to match that, and then start introducing some of that to the base of the tire. Now, because I've because I don't even know what I'm doing here. But because I've made that layer attached to the below group, I can't even remember what it's called. It will only affect the pixels of that vehicle, or of that layer, but below it. So rather than, like, if I was to draw here, you can't see anything because it's not affecting those pixels. It's only affecting the pixels of the layers or layer it's attached to, in which case it's a group. So I'm just going to start introducing some darks there just to get rid of that edge. You don't want to introduce too much, but just enough so it looks natural. So for this, I might have to go a bit darker. Yeah, I'm just going to use black for this one. There we go. There's a bit of banding there from... And of course you can reduce the opacity of that layer should you need to. I'm pretty happy with how it's looking. Just there. Just takes the edge off it. What you can do is, because that tyre is quite bright, I think that was one of the light painted layers I'd used. You can just use this black brush to darken the whole area, should you need to. It retains a bit of the detail there, but it's a bit darker and looks more natural. And then again, I'm gonna use a smaller brush around the bottom of the tyre just to get a sharper line, and then just introduce that. There seems to be a lighter line here. That, I think, might have been a bit too dark for that area, so I'm going to hit back, and then I'm going to match the shadow area here. Let's try that again. Yeah, I think that's looking good there. Yeah, I'm happy with that. All right, cool. So that's pretty much what I'd have done. Like I said earlier, it would have been slightly different to the original one, but it gives you an idea of how I've created the shadow, and you can spend as much time as you want on it to try and get that realism spot on. But yeah, I think I'm. I actually prefer my new one. Damn it. But yeah, it gives you an idea. So that is how I've created that shadow. If you've got any questions, please feel free to ask. And good luck. And if you do use this method, let me know on Instagram, and I'll take a look, because it'd be interesting to see anyone who's used it and how it's worked for them, and compare it to how you've done it before in the past, and see whether it's been much of an improvement for you. But I hope it is, and I hope you learned something, and you can use this tutorial for your future work. And that's it. All right, cool. Thank you.